Nest Fund FM 100 Talkback Show. Your input matters. Call now on 323 3777 or 323 3999.
On the Nest Fund FM 100 Talkback Show, it is good to be back this morning. And once again, big thanks to Josu Kim for ensuring that the show's been running. And again, great job with the discussion with the PNG Forest Authority. As such, good morning to you and those joining us via our Facebook page as well. Morning through to you, Blogata. So good to be back as such. My special guest this morning, all the way from East Sepik Province, just flew in yesterday and has made time for us, is none other than the good governor for East Sepik Province, the Honourable Allan Bird, joins me this morning, a good friend of ours on Talkback. Governor, good morning through now. Once again, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Culligan, and morning to the listeners around the country.
Governor, we've got the upcoming budget that will be tabled on the 26th, or well, pretty much on 26th is when it comes to light. Now, very recently, you've made some posts on your page, in particular with a certain graph that was published by the National Statistical Office in terms of the GDP growth rate, the GDP rates that have been happening. Now, from what you've put out, there's been they've talked about the nominal growth rate of GDP of being 110.6 billion kina as of 2023, whilst the real GDP, which pretty much, as you pointed out in your statement, which says about the actual buying power of our people, is actually 69 billion kina, a massive 40 billion kina gap in this case. You brought a copy of that. For people who don't actually realize that, how do we translate that to the everyday Papua New Guinean? What does this graph actually mean?
Well, this graph measures the economic performance of the country. That's what it does. Okay, but then it's interesting because what they try to do is they try to measure prices that I guess increase with inflation and devaluation and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
And then the other measure is what they're calling the constant price GDP. That's the real measure of how the economy is doing. So you got nominal GDP. This is the nominal GDP that the government keeps talking about, and Prime Minister James Marape keeps talking about growing the economy to 200 billion kina. Actually, you can grow the economy to 200 billion kina tomorrow just by devaluing the kina. You devalue the kina and suddenly you have a 200 billion kina economy. So inflation and devaluation will actually lead to a bigger number in terms of your nominal GDP. And that's what they've been measuring. But the real GDP, actually, that measures the actual performance, what people are actually feeling. And if you look at the graph that was published by NSO, it shows that it's quite stagnant. Since Somare until now, it's hardly grown. It's just kind of stayed stagnant, maybe small increases over the period. So our people out in the provinces and everybody else, including the city, they're feeling the pinch of this. They're seeing it in the prices. You see, nominal GDP actually measures the increase in prices, the change in value. So when you say, oh, look, the country is doing really well because we've got 110 billion kina economy, I think, the number for this year is 120 billion. Yes, that number is going up. But the real number is actually staying constant, you see. So you're losing value over time. I've argued about that on the floor of Parliament. I've actually stopped the Prime Minister several times to try to correct him, because what he is saying is not what's actually happening in the economy. And the other thing also is that there's been a lot of borrowing by the government, and they've been printing money. So that borrowing is actually reflected in the nominal GDP. They're borrowing money and putting it into the economy, and it's increasing the number. So it looks good on paper.
Yep.
So, but the actual reality tells a different story, and that's what these graphs were all about. And like for me, I've been looking for this graph for the last 5 or 6 years. I've been trying to find these numbers. So I'm very happy that the National Statistical Office released them to the public. And they published it in the newspaper for the first time. So for people like me, you now have it in graphic form,
Public record.
Public record, it's there. And so they might say, oh, look, the headline is NSO reports a 3% GDP growth rate in 2023. But if you look at the graph, and economists will look at this graph and say, yeah, okay, you got a 3% growth, but you've actually got a massive decrease in real economic activity that's measured by, your real GDP. And it's right there. And for the people out there like looking in, you can see the graph, and you can see the blue line on top, and this is published by NSO. That's the GDP number that Marape keeps talking about. Is the blue one on top. You can see the orange line at the bottom. That shows the reality that you are feeling in your pocket right now. It's right there. So, I want to thank NSO for this, and I think it's important that, and the good thing is with that simple picture, it tells the biggest story that all of us have been kind of arguing over for the last 3 or 4 years. That's it right there.
That huge gap in between that. What exactly is that, the gap?
Well, you see, you have to go back to see where the lines join up.
Yep.
This line joins up, funny enough, when Grand Chief Sir Michael was the Prime Minister. And what he actually did was real economic growth. And that was when they brought the PNG LNG in. The PNG LNG was a significant investment because it brought real economic growth on the ground. So when it did, you'll find that real GDP actually matched nominal GDP. So the lines actually joined when Somare was the Prime Minister. After that, you started to get the gap, and that reflects all of the borrowing. It reflects the printing of money. So it reflects the devaluation of the kina. It reflects the inflation. All of that is actually demonstrated there in this graph. That's what it means.
So coming back to someone who actually summarized what your statement wrote, said that if you were to look at it, 110 billion kina is what they're talking about nominal GDP. But the actual real GDP is 69 billion kina. And talking about a 40 billion kina gap. And he put this into perspective, saying that, okay, suppose you only 100 kina. 100 kina, past time at the beginning when time was Somare, 100 kina will get you 100 kina worth of goods. Now, with this current graph that we see, your 100 kina can only get you 64 kina worth of goods. I kind of feel that when I go to the shops.
No, I think everybody is feeling that, and this is the thing. You remember when I brought the rice and the tin fish and the biscuits and.
Go to Parliament?
Yeah, lo try lo. Because I think a lot of members of Parliament, they don't even understand this thing. There's inflation. You might as well talk about heaven. It's a completely different. So I brought it in to say, look, you want to see, and in fact, when I was in Parliament, I spoke about a 40% increase in prices. And that's the thing. That increase in price is actually reflected in the nominal GDP. The nominal GDP reflects the increase in prices. The real GDP, it reflects the actual production, the actual economic growth, So, it's showing in the shops. But all the government publications are telling a different story. Until NSO came out last week, Friday, and put this out, and they were saying, oh look, 3% growth rate GDP, now hallelujah and all this. But when I looked at it, I was like, oh, thank you Lord, this is a different story entirely, because this is the truth right here. You can't hide it, and this is the thing. And for me, the challenge on this government and the challenge on the next government and every other government is to try to bring those two lines together. You need to we need to increase production. The other way you can fix this line is if they start Wafi Golpu construction tomorrow. Because that's real economic growth. If you put Wafi Golpu in, that investment that goes in, then you'll find that this orange line and by move Guantaplo meet him, this blue line. But if government continues to borrow, it's going to push that blue line further and further away, you think him. That's the problem. People don't realize that government spending, too much government spending, can actually fuel, especially if they're spending it in the wrong place. Or just spending money go foul, or I'm loose abrota. And that money, they just keep throwing it into the economy. It's going to drive prices up. And that's what's happening.
Wow. The other thing I also wanted to make mention. Now, your good counterpart, Honorable Gary Jufa, currently sitting as the chair for the Parliamentary Committee on Public Sector Reform, in this case. I've had chats with other colleague members of yourself, one thing's for sure they all agree on. The public service is a very expensive machinery and it's bloated. It needs to be cut as well. And this is apart from the junkets and the trips that are all going, emoluments, I want something on that.
Yeah.
For yourself, is that one priority that we could be cutting back on? We now see, like, I'm just putting this into context because what we're seeing across in America, I know it's another story altogether, but Trump has decided to put Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to head something called Doge in this case.
Look, my view is that you need to increase the productivity levels. Okay. So, for example, we need more policemen. We need more nurses. We need more doctors. So, in those kinds of areas, we need to ensure that we've got people there with the right skills. And policemen, obviously, we need numbers.
Yes.
So that part of the public service needs to increase deliberately.
Yes.
Okay, the other public servants, like, for example, if I want to raise a check to pay someone for whatever in my province, it takes like several months to actually push it through the system. So that to me shows that productivity levels are very low. Someone might be sitting in the office for 8 hours, but they might only do 30 minutes worth of work, you see.
True.
That's productivity. So the challenge for the government is to increase the productivity. Whoever is already there, you don't need to employ more people, you need to increase their productivity. So they need to produce more. So coming back to this graph on nominal GDP and on real GDP, that actually measures productivity as well. If your nominal GDP is running away, that means that you're not producing enough real goods and services.
Yes.
Because real goods and services are also measured in your real GDP.
That's right.
So part of that measure, I believe, is the lack of performance in the public sector. You see, all these public servants we're talking about, they need to lift their game. They need to produce. Their output needs to increase because real GDP is a measure of economic output. So, yeah, we can cut down the public service, and I agree we should, and especially in a lot of the administrative functions. You see, we could cut them down. But the other thing you could also do is figure out ways to get more productivity out of those public servants. Get them to do more, because if they do more, then of course there'll be more value for the people. You see, and this is the thing: we're not getting value for money on a lot of the things we're doing. If we're performing better in one place, then you can shift the money to the areas that we really need. We don't need to keep borrowing all the time. And I've made this argument before. It's highly inefficient, you see. And inefficiency leads to corruption because it provides an opportunity for corruption.
Yes.
See. So public service is becoming more and more inefficient to the point where it's encouraging more and more corruption, you see. The two of them are feeding off each other and supporting one another, and it's growing. And we're feeling all of this, you see. So you've got to, one of the arguments, with respect to Gary Jufa, I don't know if I'm still on his committee, but at one point I was on his committee. And I said to him, look, if I was to fix the public service, there's one very easy thing I would do. And that is that I would pick up the Public Services Commission. At the moment, the Public Services Commission is like a redundant thing. All it does is it listens to complaints from public servants and reinstates them. It's a constitutional office. I would go in and amend their roles and responsibilities so they become a public service ombudsman. Yeah? So they become an independent body that checks on the performance of public servants. So, because right now, public servants, there's no one checking their performance. No one actually does. So they become accountable to nobody. So I said to my brother, Governor Jufa, I said, look, why don't we create an independent body that's already there? We don't have to they don't need to employ more people, or you don't need to create something new. Public Services Commission is already there.
Yep.
Let's just change, that's the way I think. I don't want to change 100 things. I want to change one thing, and that one thing changes 80 things, you see.
Yep.
That's the way I think. I'm an 80-20%. So for me, at the moment, it's Public Services Commission. I would just deal with them. Don't worry about the entire public service. You task those people, give them the teeth, and you let them do the work. You thinking? So they become a mechanism that will hold public servants to account. It'll check their performance, and if they're not performing, it should be able to measure their performance. Public servants don't do performance management. So nobody knows how they're actually performing, if they're performing, and whether they're really needed or not. Those sorts of assessments are not made, you see. So you need, like, Department of Personal Management doesn't do those sorts of things, you see. And they don't really have the powers because they're not a constitutional office. Public Services Commission is a constitutional office. They have similar powers to the Ombudsman Commission. You know, some of these constitutional offices, they have similar powers. So why don't we just change that and get them to do some actual work? I mean, I even suggested this on, we had a committee hearing, I can't remember, I think it was elections or something, on gender-based violence, and we had the Public Services Commission come and speak to us. And I said to them, what do you think if we changed your terms of reference and you become like an... And they agreed with me. But the thing is, who's going to take it to Parliament? It's got to be the work of a parliamentary committee to take it there. And government needs to bring that legislation to change and retask them to do this. They were happy with my suggestion. And they thought it was a good idea.
Many great ideas tend to get overlooked. In the case, I say this in light of Dr. Thomas Wangi, who I had from National Research Institute, who critiqued, we're coming back to the inflation issue here, who critiqued the IMF loan that we took last year, saying that we shouldn't take that loan. It will drive up inflation through imported inflation. Sure enough, it happened. Yeah. He released another report mid-year this year, talking about now the imported inflation that we currently incur. And the onus now, I think the restrictions that the IMF had placed, according to the report that he wrote, the restrictions that the IMF had placed on the PNG government was that the PNG government could not keep using loans to prop up the foreign exchange, which they've been doing for a while now. Mm-hmm. Everything had to start relying on their exports. Hence, we've seen the mad dash in trying to get certain mines off the ground quickly, as much as possible. The creation of our agriculture departments, coffee, cocoa, and...
Well, here's a funny thing. Here's a funny thing. If we did not renegotiate Papua LNG, if we did not renegotiate that, Papua LNG would have started production this year.
Really?
Yes. Because had this government not decided to renegotiate everything, just like they did with Pogara, just like they did with Papua LNG, just like they're doing with Wafi-Golpu, if they didn't do any of that, Papua LNG would have started. Papua LNG would have been in production now. Okay? And that would have flushed a whole bunch of money into the economy. You look at Pogara. By shutting down Pogara, we removed almost 6 billion or 7 billion US dollars from our economy by shutting that down. So you now have a forex problem. Well, part of the reason is that you shut down Pogara. So you basically, there would have been about, I think 7 or 8 billion dollars coming in from Pogara, but we closed it. Now you have startup costs and everything else, and Papua New Guinea will not get any dividends from it for 10 years. You see, that was a dumb decision. Come back, Papua LNG. That deal was done. Charles Abel was the treasurer. He led the negotiations and everything else. Mm-hmm. Governor Hebeta was on the committee. Everything, they just had to sign off. They didn't. Now Papua LNG is going to start in 2032.
2032?
We've pushed it out because, they've got issues now. But they were ready to go. That would have fixed our economic problems, fixed our FX problems. They wouldn't need to borrow all that money. You see, they made a bad decision, so they had to borrow all that money to cover up the bad decision.
My goodness.
And who's going to pay for it?
We are.
Taxpayers are going to pay for it.
All of us.
All of us are going to pay for it, you see. It was a bad decision. I was one of those that argued against it. And people were like, you Pasimos. I argued against and when it came to voting on the floor of Parliament, we were told in caucus, if you don't support it, don't vote against it on the floor. You abstain. So I abstained from voting on Pogara and from Papua LNG. I abstained. But they went ahead with it, you see. So online we're supporting this player. They should bear a lot of the responsibility for the problems that we are facing now. These are all man-made. These were all made by the government. It wasn't an accident.
By this current government.
By this current government.
So much for the small-term pain for long-term gain.
This is long-term pain for, I don't know when the gain is going to come. But my prediction is that if you're going to see any turnaround in the economy, probably if Wafi-Golpu starts, that will ease some of the pain, particularly on the FX side. And that should also improve our foreign exchange. So that might help the cost of kina, like improving. Because when Wafi Golpu comes in and they start doing things in Morobe, they're going to bring in US dollars because they need kina.
Yep.
So they're going to buy up all the kina that's in the system. And by buying up the kina, they're going to drive up the kina value, you see. That's what we need. It's just a demand-supply thing. Right now, there's no demand for kina. The only people that want kina is the government.
Yep.
So they're printing it. They're printing more money. That's what we're doing. So when money supply increases, of course, its value comes down.
Yep.
That's what we're facing right now.
As far as agriculture goes, Governor, as you being in one of the key agricultural provinces with many of the initiatives that you've undertaken, how does agriculture play a role in trying to address this deficit that we're currently experiencing? What needs to be done?
You need to increase production. That's what you need. You need more production of coffee, more production of oil palm, more production of cocoa, more production of coconuts, and you need to ship them out. You see, the Somalia government, when NA was in charge, they had what they call an export-driven recovery strategy, which they implemented. And that export-driven recovery strategy, it started to kick in long before the LNG came in, you see. They were pushing exports, boosting exports, you see. If you look at exports in the last 10 years, they've actually gone stagnant. Coffee production is stagnant. Cocoa production is slightly high. Palm oil is kind of stagnant. So a lot of our agricultural production is actually stagnant. It's not increasing. So again, if you increase your output, it comes back to inefficiency, all of the efficiencies and all of those sorts of things, increasing your productivity, increasing your output. When that happens, you'll see the difference. Kina will become stronger. Why? Because they're paying in US dollars. And then you got US dollars chasing kina. So what that does is it starts to take kina out of circulation, you see. And then you're going to see some of these improvements. So these are very basic economic and business principles. They're not like complicated. It's not like rocket science or anything. It's quite simple.
So from your perspective, from what you've been witnessing, say for the last 5 years, what's been the holdup in increasing our agriculture exports?
One of the things you'll find, and this is where like even the World Bank, I think World Bank or IMF, they wrote a critique for the PNG government, I think 2 years ago, where they said this. They said, Papua New Guinea needs to invest in its productive capacity. All the money we're borrowing, we're just borrowing it to fund consumption. So we're borrowing money and we're not putting it into anything tangible, you see. So it's not giving you a return. We're building a road to nowhere. We pay 400 million kina to build a road, seal it in the middle of nowhere, and there's no economic return for that road, you see. Now, if you do that enough times, if you do it one-off, it's okay. But if you do it consistently, that's when you end up with a graph like this. This is consistently investing in the wrong things. You get graphs like that. So the productive capacity in agriculture has not been improved, you see. Again, our output in mining, oil and gas hasn't really improved because we're plateauing. A lot of this is becoming, and it's being reflected in the economy. At the same time, we are producing babies faster than the economy is able to sustain it.
Yep.
And so that's creating another problem because whatever goods and services are produced in a country, it has to be divided equally amongst all of us so we can all kind of participate based on the constitution. There's an equality concept there. Now, if our population keeps increasing and the real economic growth doesn't keep pace with it, then what happens is that availability becomes less. So, you're struggling with medicines at your clinics and hospitals and things like that. These are the real impacts of, an economy that's tanking. It's struggling to grow. So all of these things, because we're investing in the wrong places, You go to invest in the productive capacity so that your production increases. That then means you can sell a lot more. You can get more money, and then in return, it continues to circulate and grow your real economy, you see. We're not doing that. And government investment has been going to the wrong places. I mean,
True.
PM Marape himself, last time he said, look, he's going to call everybody together and question the Minister for Coffee and all these ministers, and he's going to try and find out, I've been saying grow the agriculture for 5 years, and it hasn't grown. So now he wants to do what do they call it?
An audit.
He wants to do an audit. Remember he said it last time?
Yep.
But the question is, what did you invest? If you invested something in the capacity to increase your production,
No.
then you can go back and audit it. What did you invest in? That's the key question.
And that's exactly what Dr. Wangi was saying. He said, this IMF loan you make is now. What it should do if you're stopping us from propping up the FX with our loans, that money should directly go towards increasing our production in our agriculture sector. That's what he said. But at the moment, I don't know where that money is going. It's not being put into investing back into agriculture. Just like he basically put the analogy, Anto. You won't blame the farmer. Farmer, you will loan lo bank. That loan you give him is supposed to service the tractor that's going to plow the fields and do things.
Yes.
You know, like simply the money tromai lo buena
Pani Marina.
Yeah. It was a really simple analogy. You invested back into like you said, the
Productive capacity.
Productive capacity boost.
Yeah.
And we took that loan, and we don't know where that money is going.
The money is actually going to paying for goods and services, not in investment.
Not in investment.
Consumption.
Oh.
So the money is going into paying for overseas trips, to paying for conferences, to paying for fuel for cars to drive around, you know?
Goodness.
So it's not actually going into the economy in the sense that it's building a capacity in the economy to increase the output of the economy. So, like I said, we're spending 400 million kina. Look at a lot of these so-called Connect PNG roads. These are not economic roads, you know? These are politically determined roads. A politician will come, and because he's friends with the Prime Minister, he votes for the Prime Minister, they give him a 400 million kina road in his district. Now, if you do that enough times, and if enough members of parliament are getting political roads, which money are you going to spend on developing economic roads? Where's the money that you're going to use to build a port, you know, or upgrade a port so that you can have more exports going out of that port? No, but yeah. So it's lopsided in the way that we are prioritizing where we are investing. Remember, next year's budget might be about 28, 29 billion. You see, if it's that amount, and we are not putting the money from that budget into the productive capacity that we are just talking about,
yes,
and Dr. Wangi spoke about.
Yep.
Well, we're going to have the same problem because this gap that you're seeing now is going to increase.
True.
And people are going to feel it even more in their pockets. But here's the worst thing. If you have super fund, you know, how long have you been contributing to super fund? Since you started working?
Since I started working. Yeah.
Okay. For example, if you have, say, 100,000 kina in your super fund right now,
yep,
well, I'm telling you that your super fund is only worth 64,000.
Goodness.
Because of the poor performance of the government, you have lost 36,000 kina in your super fund.
Goodness.
That's the real meaning of all of this. Now, if we keep performing badly, you could lose 50% of your super fund. It's sitting there. You might think you have 100,000 kina. Number talk 100,000 kina, but real true kaya and 50,000 so. It could go to that, you see. It could go to that. A lot of Papua New Guineans who've been working really, really hard for all their lives, and they've got, you know, someone with 1 million kina superannuation. In real terms, Emi got 600,000 kina sols in Alobek. That's he's lost 400,000 kina. His life's hard work and savings and everything, yeah. Government kill him because of government poor management.
True.
And lack of discipline, spending money all over the place. Emia, you've lost your value. However, if the thing turns around and real GDP increases and then you're beginning to end up with reducing that gap, then the value of that money will actually go back up again, you see. But if they don't, and if they keep going the way they're going, the losses are going to be greater than, I mean, people are actually going to lose what they already have. That's the problem.
Governor, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. And again, I do invite you next week if you are free anytime to do pop in. I would love to have a discussion about the budget coming up. But truly, this figure graph so the NSO, I think it was an eye-opener for many of us. And especially when you put it in that context. But again, anyone, if you are tuning in this morning or watching via our Facebook page, check out Governor Bird's page. It's Allan Bird. Check out his page or just look at what he's actually put out. And plus, apart from that, WGPNG has also done a summary version of this. So check out WGPNG. They've actually posted something, done a summary of what the governor has actually posted out there. And trust me, it's a real eye-opener for us. Kind of explains basically what it means when you mean how much the man married the film skin pen, huh? Imi talk finish. Past time rice me buy no 38 kina, now me buy no 50 kina. You're lucky to get it at 49 kina, 48 kina, 10 kg bag of roots rice, I'm telling you. Some people are skin ben and start long, especially some of us who support one house for that matter. But
What if you have 26 people in the house?
Gabra, please mix him stress on level. I don't want to increase it any further. But again, it's always a pleasure having you on, and I do once again invite you next week if you are free or anytime in future. I'd love to have a chat with you before the actual budget on the 26th.
No worries.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Culligan, and thank you.
Finally, any last parting comments to our listeners?
Well, I wish I could come and tell you good news. And I apologize that I always bring the bad news. But I think that, we need to bring a level of honesty into these discussions. And I always say to people, numbers don't lie. And, I'm really pleased that, and I want to say, thank you to NSO and the hardworking people there. They probably don't get a good rep all the time, but I'm thankful that they're bringing these things out and we're able to see it and have a discussion. But more than that, I want to say to people, look, if you're in the egg space, these are good times. Prices are good. Get out there and make a bit of money. Whether it's in cocoa or coffee, both of them are doing well right now. Cocoa is going to continue to do well for another 2 or 3 years, So, clean your cocoa plot, add some fertilizer to it. Same with your coffee, add some fertilizer, and you should be looking at a good harvest next year if you fertilize it now. So invest in yourself. Government is not investing in the right things, but that doesn't mean you have to be stupid as well. One bag fertilizer costs about 100 kina. Go spend 100 kina and put it, add a little bit low, or the ash blow, or the cacao blue, or coffee blue, and trust me, you're going to see a good return next year.
Governor, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You got the Major News Bulletin up next time. Culligan Tanda, have a top safe week. And again, take care as always to you and your own as such. Again, take these words seriously when you have discussions, when you have messages like this coming from Governor Bird, someone who's very critical about the current state of our economy and who's not afraid to speak his mind. We need more of him. We need more of you. No one por it. Over mouse, talk out, talk straight. I'm Culligan Tanda. God bless.